Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fourth lesson in our PowHer series. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the power of a self reflective woman. And the woman that we are going to focus on is the woman in the Song of Songs, often referred to as the Shulamite woman. I have chosen this particular woman because, one, I love her declaration of I am black and beautiful, but because of what those verses mean in their particular context. I believe that there is power in introspection, in reviewing ourselves, in examining our interiors, which is what I think this woman does. She looks at and it encourages us to look at our attitudes, our thoughts, the roots of our actions, why we say what we say and do what we do, to look inside and make the necessary adjustments, to look inside instead of simply focusing on the outside and focusing on others. So for tonight, I want to lift up the Song of Songs, chapter 1, verses 5 through 6. I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keepers of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not kept. Just a few introductory remarks about the Song of Songs. The actual closest parallel to this particular portion of the Bible is ancient Egyptian love poetry, and it features and highlights in particular this woman whose voice we hear in the very beginning, who declares that she is black and beautiful. The first thing I want to point out about this self-reflective woman is that she is able to show God without ever mentioning God. And perhaps it is time that we broaden our understanding of God and how we demonstrate and show God. Because so often we have limited our witness to a particular creed or confession, saying magic words like Jesus is my Lord and Savior or in the name of Jesus, without necessarily giving the proper attention to the loyalty and allegiance that confession makes, so that it impacts every decision, every thought, and every action of our lives. How we align ourselves, who we align ourselves with, that demonstrates our commitment to Jesus. And so we live in an environment now where if you don't say Merry Christmas, you're not a Christian. If you don't say Jesus' name at particular times in particular places, then you're not a Christian. To do that is to limit being a Christian, when originally those who followed Jesus were referred to as followers of the way, demonstrating that this movement and this following was about a lifestyle and a commitment to a lifestyle, not merely words that come out of our mouths. And so often we limit our witness to our words, or we prioritize the witness of our words, when in reality, people see and experience us in more ways than just us speaking. In the book of the Song of Songs, God is not mentioned once. But y'all, the whole theme of this book is love. And we are told that God is love. That the reason Jesus was sent into the world was because God so loved the world. That the manifestations, actions, and embodiment of God are rooted in love. And this woman knows how to love and knows how to receive love. And a lot of times we are deficient in one side of that or the other. We are really good at giving love and showing love, right? And sometimes that is born out of this sense in which we're not worthy to get it back. Like we're good at giving it, but hesitant on receiving. And then some people are great at receiving it, but not so great at showing it or giving it. in this book, we see this woman as a model who knows how to do both. And I believe that that requires self-reflection and introspection to really come to terms with ourselves, what we think of ourselves, the experiences that we have, the ways in which we have wounded, and how those wounds can impede our ability to give and to show love. Because ultimately, God is love. And so we can show God without even saying God. That if our walk with God doesn't demonstrate our commitment and allegiance to God, our talk is not going to be sufficient to cover that up. So if one's life were a spiritual charades, could people see Jesus in us without us saying Jesus? If we shut our mouths, could people see Jesus in us without us saying Jesus, or saying I go to church, or saying this is what I believe, or saying something that's aligned with scripture, or some of our churchified lingo? What this woman does, I believe, at least for me, is convicts me to look at how I am embodying my relationship with God, not simply just teaching it and preaching it and doing it in these public ways on given occasions, on Sunday mornings or Tuesday night or my Monday night Bible study, but how am I connecting with God in the core of who I am, that God's light shines through me, God's love pours from me, and enables me to give and receive love in a very healthy way. And when we look at this particular book, Song of Songs, or the most superlative songs, is if we translate sort of the Hebrew literally, or as we know it, the Song of Solomon, because the book is attributed to Solomon. The whole themes are around love, and very much so physical love, because physical love is supposed to be beautiful, and it's supposed to be holy. And in order for it to be beautiful and for it to be holy, then we've got to be whole too, to participate in it. And it's got to be connected and rooted in who God is, that we are truly loving people in every form or fashion, the way God has commanded us to love one another, right? And so sometimes, y'all, it's this holy love where we demonstrate our connection with God, but all these other forms of love don't reflect our connection with God. And I believe that this woman's introspection and ability to look inside herself enables her to love on all levels in a God-glorifying way. Because ultimately, our connection with God has to be more than performative and public and in pulpits and in pews, but extend to all areas of our life. And that begins with what's going on inside of us, not just outside of us. So she is able to show God without ever mentioning God. And she knows herself enough to speak for herself. The woman in the Song of Songs is the only unmediated female voice in all of Scripture. There is never a narrator narrating or reporting what she said. There's no she said, right? There's no she asked. There's no she declared. It is just simply her words unfiltered from the page. She uses the first person singular I, and she speaks for herself because it becomes evident that she knows herself and she has an honest assessment of herself. For better or for worse, she has been able to articulate it and articulate the positive and the not so positive things that have happened to her. She doesn't just mimic what other people say about her. She doesn't buy into the opinions or the criticisms of others. That despite her brothers, she has learned to speak for herself and to speak positively. So I said she knows how to speak positive and negative. It shows the places where she's arrived, and then she's also able to point to the places of her growth, right? So she says, she makes this declaration, I am black and beautiful, right? But then she goes on to talk about, don't gaze on me because I am dark. Don't gaze on me because the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I did not keep. There's a positive assessment of who she is. I am black and I am beautiful. But at the same time, there is this recognition, sort of this undercurrent of recognizing that people may look down on her because of her complexion. This is not necessarily racism. This is classism, because this is in a region where all the people would be considered people of color. And so her darkness simply symbolizes, or her darker complexion symbolizes, the fact that she has been outside. She's been working in the fields. She has not been in protected places, would suggest sort of a lower economic level than others, right? So the light skin represented the fact that you could be inside, you could escape the heat and the elements of the outside. You could be waited on instead of having to do particular tasks and waiting on other people. And so she's looking at, or speaking about, people who are looking at her in perhaps a pejorative way. And the reason why she was doing the things that she was doing was because of the anger of her brothers that put her in the vineyard and caused her to neglect her own vineyard. She's expressing the positive of who she is, but she's also acknowledging the place where she came from. I think what she had to overcome in order to reach the declaration. In other words, I am black and I am beautiful, but there was a time when I did not think of myself as such, a time when I was pushed around by some other people, a time where I allowed people to make me do their job and neglected taking care of myself. But I came to myself and I recognized who I was, that I didn't always think I was black and beautiful, right? That what happens when we are self-reflective is we recognize those places of growth, ways in which we didn't always think the way we thought, for the best or for the worst. Where we are now isn't where we were before. There's been an evolution of our thought, a recognition of where we have come from. At some point, there came a revelation that we needed to change our mind about some things, and then change our speech around some things, so that we could change our actions around some things. So she is honest enough with herself and is able to speak for herself. Would to God that we could be honest enough with ourselves and then speak out of the truth of who we are. She then aligns her I ams with God. Now, when she starts off by saying, I am black and beautiful, immediately my mind is going to Exodus 3, where Moses asked God, who should I say sent me? And God's response is, I am that I am, or I am who I am. And then flip over to the New Testament, where in the Gospel according to John, there are these 7 I am statements of Jesus, where Jesus talks about, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the door to the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the light of the world. I am living water. All of these different I am statements that are connected to the great I am, rooted in the identity of who God is. When she says, I am black and beautiful, I believe that she is connecting to the truth and the reality of who it is that God made her to be. And y'all, I believe that everybody should have some of their own personal I am statements that are connected to who God is and who God says that you are. Rooted in God's self-revelation, just like Jesus was when Jesus said, I am. that can anchor our identity in who God created us to be, right? We all should have those kinds of I ams in our lives. That's not dictated by our situation, not dictated by people's opinions of us, not dictated by what we've gone through or what we have been through, but rooted in the truth of who God is and who God says we are. Some unchanging I ams that don't just talk about what we're going through, but who we are. That we line up the transient, right? We can be honest. I am tired. I am sick. I am sick and tired. I am frustrated. I am sad. I am empty. I am depleted. Whatever those I ams are. I'm not saying we fake it. I'm not saying we lie about it. We acknowledge the truth of where we are, but do not let those transient I ams stay uncontested and not challenged by the greater I am of who God is. I am tired, but I am more than a conqueror through him who has loved me, right? I am broken, but I am healed because there is a balm in Gilead. I'm not always going to be this way. This is a transient I am. This is what I am currently going through, even if it's for an extended period of time. But this is not the totality of who I am. We all need to have some I am statements that align with who God created us to be, that can counter every transient I am statement, so that the transient I am statement that is dictated by the world and by experience and by what is going on right now doesn't overcome or overshadow the eternal I am. Who we are despite our circumstances. Who we are despite what we're feeling right now. She says, I am Black and beautiful, despite the fact that people want to negatively gaze on her, despite the fact that her brothers sent her into this vineyard because they were angry, despite the fact that she had been neglecting herself. She still declares, I am Black and I am beautiful. And y'all, that's how we made it through as a people. We insisted on declaring, even if it was within ourselves and nobody else heard it, that we were creations of God, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we were fully human, that even if they treated us like mules and dogs, we knew our worth before God. And those are the I ams that I'm encouraging us to cultivate. So think about all the I ams you've been saying. Have they been lined up with the ultimate I am, who is God? Don't let these temporary, conditional I ams remain uncontested. That's going to require some introspection, some self-reflection to look at how we're speaking and how we're thinking. Number 4, she's honest about what had happened and why, right? She says, my mother's sons were angry with me, and the result of that anger is that they made me the keeper of the vineyards. And apparently she went into the vineyards based on the anger of her mother's son. And there she was darkened by the sun being out in the heat of the day. And that it resulted in her neglecting her own vineyard because she says, my own vineyard I have not kept. And there are times when we neglect ourselves to keep the peace, to assuage people's anger, times in which we have been made to feel obligated or selfish because we considered or put ourselves in the equation or considered our needs, or God forbid, we had the audacity to consider what we wanted and were made to feel selfish. And so we swallowed it and we succumbed and we did what people wanted from us to keep the peace. And that's the situation that I see this woman in. They're angry with her, put her in the vineyard to do this work, but she hasn't kept her own vineyard. She hasn't taken care of herself. And it is because of her own self-reflection, her willingness to look at what had happened and why it had happened and how it had affected her. And in my next point, I'll talk about how she's honest about the role she played in it. So often we are made to feel like we are selfish when we consider ourselves. Because so often, especially for Black women, the world has ascribed to us the role of being the surrogate. We're the one who takes the place of other people, fills in the gaps, shores up what is broken to make sure things continue. That has been a role that has been thrust upon us historically. Dolores Williams points that out in Sisters in the Wilderness, that how during antebellum times, Black women had to take the place of white women and be their mammies and for their children and these housekeepers and all these different kinds of things. And then once slavery ended, so much of our economic stability depended upon us functioning in households and functioning in jobs in the place of other people, being animals in the fields, being mothers to other people's children, being sex objects for men who would abuse and take advantage of us, being in the workplace in jobs where they would hire a Black woman in the place of a Black man. And so often we carry those burdens and then are made to feel like that's an obligation that we are supposed to carry, right? This whole image of the strong Black woman that Shaniqua Barnes talks about, where it is literally killing us because we have defined Black womanhood as the one who just bears up under the burden, who keeps the peace, who is the bridge that everybody else can walk over. Zora Neale Hurston talks about the Black woman as the mule of the world, that the white man drops the load on the Black man and the Black man drops the load on the Black woman. However the chain of command goes, the result is that we have often carried so much, and so often Christianity has been used to justify it. That's what it means to be a good Christian woman. You just take it. You carry it. And then you just carry it to Jesus. This woman, I think, comes to a recognition that there are some things she doesn't have to take and some things that she doesn't have to carry. And yes, she's honest about the fact that she does go into the vineyard and that she does do it because they're angry with her. And sometimes we have to get at the whys. Right? Not simply why they did what they did, because sometimes we'll be able to figure it out and sometimes we won't. And sometimes even when we do have an answer, it still won't make enough sense for us to feel like we figured it out. But why we respond the way we respond. What were our actions? What were our allowances? What were our boundaries or lack of boundaries? Why did we allow some stuff that was done to us that we could control? Y'all hear me so clearly when I say that we could control, because there are some things that have happened to you that are listening to this lesson that you could not control. Some people took advantage. Some people were abusive. Some people were just hateful and mean and nasty, and it had nothing to do with who you are, and yet you carried it as if you were responsible. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when we actually do have some options, right? when we actually do have some control over some things? Why are we saying yes to some things that we want to say no to? Why are we carrying some things that we don't need to carry? Why are we being bullied by other people's attitudes or emotions or their needs to the detriment of ourselves and neglect our vineyards? Self-reflection means we have to ask ourselves these hard questions, right? And to ask myself hard questions about why I keep saying yes to some things and then am struggling and suffering through it because it's too much. I'm already at capacity. I have to examine why I said those yeses, why I felt the need to carry those things. Why did I feel I couldn't say no? What made the no so hard? How did I develop this habit of saying yes? What's going on with me? What am I trying to prove? Right? Do I not feel good enough to say no? Like I'm constantly proving myself. These are all things that require self-reflection when I find myself in a place I don't want to be in, or doing things I don't want to do, or putting up with stuff I don't want to put up with. What is within my power to change it? Right? And so when it's the stuff we couldn't control, when we were the victim of some stuff, I don't care how you dressed, that didn't justify anybody abusing you physically or sexually. Somebody messed with you and you're a child. That is not your fault. That is the sickness of somebody else that was put upon you. Don't carry that, because that's not your fault. That's not your responsibility. But stuff we could control, right? People that we continue to deal with and they just suck the life out of us. Maybe we need to examine that boundary. People that we allow to treat us as less than who we are, or who we shrink and become small in their presence, because we know they can't take who we really are. Self-reflection and prayer to consider and understand ourselves and not just continue to go through the motions of some stuff. She's honest about what happened. She doesn't take responsibility for her brothers being mad at her or why they were mad at her. It's just a fact. They were. And they sent her into the vineyard. And she's honest about her part in what happened. Her part in what happened is not the same as a responsibility for what happened. Y'all hear me? Sometimes what happened is not our responsibility. We're not responsible for what they did. But we do have to take responsibility for ourselves about how we'll proceed and what we will do. How we will live in light of certain actions and situations that may have been beyond our control, but it's still our life. And we don't release all control into their hands. So can we be honest about how we responded or what we've done? So something horrific might have happened to me and it was not my fault. I do not bear the blame. It is not my responsibility for the evil that was inflicted upon me. The result was that I crawled within myself, put walls around me. And now I'm having a hard time engaging in positive and healthy relationships. I'm having a hard time dealing even with the good people who want to be close to me. I'm living in shame and I'm living in guilt and I'm living in fear. I got to be self-reflective and honest about that part. so I can get the help that I need to walk into the places that I desire to be and walk into the person that I desire to become. She's honest about her part about what happened. She says, I neglected my vineyard, right? All of this happened. None of it is necessarily her taking responsibility for what they did. She says, man, the result of it is I didn't keep my own vineyard. And that's what self-reflection does. It moves us beyond just the place of what happened, right? To look at what the results of what happened were, where that's left us, how that's affected our thinking and our reacting and our relationships and who we are and our choices, and all of that is part of the self-reflection. And she's honest about what happened. She didn't keep her vineyard. She neglected herself. Think of vineyards as places of productivity, because the vineyard is the place where the crops are grown and it's used and sold for one's livelihood. Vineyards are places that produce enjoyment because they produce the fruit of the vine. And so those are used for the celebration and for places of and festivals and all of those things, right? Those happy, signaling happy things, right? Times of joy. Vineyards are places of prosperity, that it's fruitfulness, right? That when the vineyard really produces, they're places of beauty and of growth and of increase. And she didn't keep her vineyard. Now, let's not make her sinful. Everything we neglect or don't do doesn't automatically equal sin. There's not necessarily a moral connotation on everything. It could just be it prevents us from being the best version of ourselves. It prevents us from walking into who it is that God has called us to be. It has prevented us from really being and experiencing the fullness that God has to offer. And she deals with the fact that because of the actions of the brothers, for which she takes no responsibility, because the responsibility is not hers, it has resulted in the fact, I didn't keep my own vineyard. I was so busy tending to other people's stuff that I haven't taken the time to tend to my own. That's a point of self-reflection for Lenten season. She reckons with the consequences of what happened, its effects, how it isn't beneficial for her at this stage, how it is preventing her perhaps for achieving or getting what it is that she wants. She has to think about what she needs to change, what has to heal, what has to be different so that her vineyard doesn't stay neglected. And I believe it is this revelation that fuels her determination. Let whatever the revelation is fuel your determination. Not for a pity party, not to stay down on yourself, but to say, seeing this, even if it's hard to see it, gives me a chance to deal with it. Gives me the chance to not unconsciously stay in it, but gives me a chance to move from it. Grow because of it, overcome it, be healed from it. That's what the revelation does. It gives me the chance to do that. About a week or so ago, I finished listening to the book Unbound by, I can't think of what her last name, but her first name is Tirana. And she was the originator of the hashtag Me Too and the Me Too movement. And she talks about her own story of sexual abuse and violence, and how she reaches one point in her life where it is almost as if she is detoxing from a drug. That's the way it read as I heard it. For her to be in a place in which she would allow herself to remember what happened because she felt like it was time to confront it, and that's what God was bringing back to her. And as she's praying her way through and weeping her way through and reading scriptures and journaling her way through, you can hear the agony of having to deal with what happened, none of which was her fault. but it was her freedom to move into the work that God was calling her to. And that's what I mean about being honest about what happened, how it has affected us, what we need to heal from, how we need to change, so that what happened, regardless of whose fault it was, doesn't keep us bound. What we did that wasn't our shining moment and our best choices doesn't keep us bound. And sure enough, what they did doesn't keep us bound. She allows the revelation to fuel her determination. She sees what happened, how she tended other people's vineyards. She sees that her brothers are angry. We don't even know why they were angry. She doesn't delve into trying to figure out why they're angry, because sometimes you got to leave people to their own stuff and let them figure it out, because we got enough of our own stuff to deal with, right? The result is that she didn't tend her own vineyard, but this isn't lining up with who she is, right? There's this dissonance between I am Black and I am beautiful, and I am this person that they sent into the vineyard and that they're looking down upon and who's neglecting their vineyard. And apparently something is happening, y'all, between verses 5 and 6, because if you read the rest of the Song of Solomon, you hear nothing else about a neglected vineyard. This woman is described as a lush orchard. She's got teeth that are bathed in milk and fitly set. Her channels are like pomegranates dripping liquid myrrh. Her breasts are like two fawns. Like everything about her is as a well-kept, nourishing, nurturing, full, ripe vineyard. So apparently, her revelation of where she was in not tending her vineyard led to her determination that I'm going to be who I truly am, and who I truly am is Black and beautiful, and I'm going to live like it, I'm going to look like it, I'm going to act like it, and people are going to recognize who I am. And that's what ends up happening as you move throughout the rest of this book. This woman is described as a kept vineyard, suggesting that she is no longer neglecting it. She is living up to her I am statement. Seventh and last point, then that means that we have to tend to what has been neglected. What has been neglected? That's what introspection helps us to do. It takes away the noise and the hustle and bustle and busyness of the world around us, and brings us to a place where we must contend with what really is, not the appearance, right? Because we can appear like it's all together. We can appear like we're happy. We can appear like everything is going okay. We can appear like the success that everyone thinks that we are, or the model, whatever that everybody thinks that we are, to the point that we can trick ourselves into believing the press that our externals have generated, or the things that people have said, and run from ourselves, live in a place of chaos internally, as long as we keep the outside looking good. As long as we raise no red flags or cause any embarrassment or look a particular kind of way in front of people. I believe God has more for us than that. That the inside could match either the outside, or the inside could begin to help the outside line up with who it really is. She clearly tends to what has been neglected based on the description of her throughout the rest of the book. The way her lover sees her, the way the daughters of Jerusalem rally around her. A change has happened from were angry with me, and they sent me into the vineyard. In my own vineyard I did not keep. she ends up tending to her vineyard. In this season of Advent, what do you need to tend to? Have you created a place of quiet and self reflection so you can hear yourself and hear what God is saying about yourself? What are the vineyards that are being neglected? What are the places of productivity, places of fruitfulness and prosperity, places of enjoyment, places of sufficiency and health and healing, right? Because the vineyard, the wine produced by the vineyard, isn't just for enjoyment. Wine was in those days was also used as an antiseptic to cleanse and treat wounds. What healing is being neglected because we're not tending to our own vineyard? Sisters, I want to encourage us to tend to our own vineyard. Stop tilling up everybody else's plot of land. Stop trying to reap a harvest in somebody else's garden. Tend to your vineyard and know that your vineyard doesn't have to look like anybody else's. It doesn't even have to produce the same kind of fruit. You can produce red grapes. Somebody else can produce purple grapes. Somebody else can produce white grapes or green grapes. It doesn't make your grapes less of a grape. Tend to your vineyard. And I think the first step is some deep self-reflection during this season of Lent, but not just during Lent. To cultivate a habit of self-reflection, to cultivate a habit of stillness that enables us to hear us. Some of us haven't heard our heart's longing in so long. And we're wondering why we are at dis-ease, why we are sad or upset, why we are unsatisfied and unfulfilled, because we have substituted what everybody said we should want or should do at the expense of hearing our own hearts. During this Lenten season, I encourage you not just simply to be self-reflective. I encourage you to develop a discipline of self-reflection. Because it's easy to keep up something than to have to come back and always do that hard cleanup. The woman in the Song of Songs, our Black and beautiful sister, shows us that self-reflection is a part of the process. And I want you to walk in the full Black and beauty of who you are. And I think it starts by looking inside.